time recording.
You guys ready? All right. Well, first of all, thank you guys so very much for having me. I was talking to Dr. Bain earlier, and I was pretty excited to do this. It wasn't about maybe to about 20 minutes ago. The nerves kind of set in, so bear with me. Like I said, in regards to the test that you guys are taking, just even in regards to the presentation today itself, you don't need to go in depth in regards to the knowledge that you need for it. It's very topical, very survey course knowledge, and that's the way I'm going to keep it in regards to the presentation. Periodically, I'll give you guys some actual like STAR test questions throughout the presentation, and you'll see a lot of that particular part of the exam. I would imagine a lot of it is, if you have the survey knowledge, you guys will be fine. So I'm going to share my screen throughout the presentation. If you guys have any questions, feel free to stop me. You have any any input or whatnot, don't be afraid to do it.
And Mr. Torres, I'm gonna be putting some things in the chat, so
okay,
just to kind of like add to it. And
yeah,
not everything that he's covering is on the EC through 6. So it's so crazy because by the time y'all get or students get to high school, right, they should have already learned this in elementary. But many times they don't, right? Many times they don't. So it's like they're hearing it for the first time. Okay.
Oh yeah, those kids, I think that they take the 8th grade U.S. History STAR test, and they won't touch on that again until they take the high school U.S. History STAR test. But anyway, so in regards to World War One, a lot of you guys might not know this, but it's a war unlike any war that has been fought before. It's the war. It's commonly referred to as the War of Lost Generations. I mean, you have mothers that lost 3 generations of kids. You have sons that grew up without their fathers, and then at this time, in regards to surgery, a lot of these young men are gonna, live the rest of their lives maimed or whatnot. It's a war, like I said, that we had never seen before. And initially, it was known as the Great War. We know it today as World War One, but it was supposed to be the war to end all wars. And we obviously know that's not the case, considering this leads us into World War Two. But look, in regards to what you guys need to cover in regards to World War One, it's not that much. Like I said, you don't need in-depth knowledge. It's survey knowledge, topical knowledge. But that being said, we're going to get into the American involvement in the war. Why do we get involved? We're allegedly neutral initially. That won't certainly be the case. We'll get into that. Another big thing we're going to cover is World War One is a new kind of war. We got different type of weapons. We have gas. We have grenades. We have airplanes now fixed with the ammunitions and whatnot. And then we have the machine gun. Of all the weapons we see in World War One, the weapon that causes the most devastation is in fact the machine gun, and we'll get into that a little bit later as well. A major issue that does come about in World War One is in regards to freedom of speech. In the time of war, should we as Americans be allowed to criticize our government? Some would argue yes, some would argue no. First Amendment says that we do in fact have the right, but there's going to be a very important court case that commonly comes up, and we'll go over that in a second. And then finally, what ends World War One is, just like any other conflict, any other war, 2 sides got to sit down, and there's got to be some type of agreement in regards to who's going to pay what, reparations are going to be paid, who's going to pay them, and where do we go from there. So, causes of World War One, just generically, the 4 main causes of World War One, okay, are nationalism, okay. Because of nationalism, that's going to spark a competition between other European nations. The British is building up their navy, and Germany does as well. Russia is looking abroad, and you're seeing these other nations building up their militaries, and they start to do that in turn, okay. We have imperialism. Imperialism, that's essentially conquering another nation to benefit your own. Okay, it's been practiced by every country, every civilization, every tribe has practiced it in some degree. Militarism, the build-up of militaries, and finally the alliance system, which is, I would argue, is probably the major cause of World War One in and of itself. So very briefly, we're going to go through what these different ideologies, what they mean and what they stand for. So nationalism, it's a strong devotion to the interests and culture of one's own nation, to the exclusion of other nations. So it does oftentimes have a negative tint. It doesn't always have to have a negative tint in regards to World War I, especially in regards to Nazi Germany. It does, in fact, have a negative tint. So essentially, if another country has some resources you want that benefit your country, go ahead and get it. Okay. And so, but within this, you have this belief that led to the idea that a single nation interest, whatever's best for your particular country, despite the ongoings and conflict within it, to do what's best for the motherland is what should be at the forefront of what's best for your country. And then within that, we're going to see a lot of conflict. You know, in Croatia, you'll have Catholics versus the Orthodox Christians there. In Serbia, you'll have conflict between the Muslims and the Orthodox Christians there. You know, same thing in these other nation states. And so World War I gives a big backdrop, especially at the end of it, where these independent ethnic groups within these countries want their independence. And that is something that's still going on today. I mean, look at Ukraine and Russia. Now, imperialism, look, imperialism, controlling a weaker nation as a source of raw materials and as a market for your products. There's just going to be what's called a scramble for Africa. And so you'll have the Belgians that go into the Congo, and there's still a scramble for Africa today. If you look at, I think, the cobalt mining there, and I believe it's in the Congo. You know, if you ever seen that movie of Mad Max, where you got these people, you know, working days on end from sunrise to sunup. I mean, they're living in that right now. There's constant collapsing of the caves for these minerals, and whatnot. But that's essentially Africa at this particular time in World War I. You got all these different nation states that have different control of parts of Africa, and as a result, conflict is going to result in there. If you have any ancestors that fought in World War I or World War II, and you look up where they fought, you'll see different theaters of war in Africa. Maybe they served in Italy or you know, different parts of Europe. Very, very common. But as nations tried to increase their economic power and influence around the world, it led to conflicts and war. Okay, and this is the argument that people face. You know, and I don't know if there's necessarily a right or wrong answer. I think you can articulate on both sides. That being said, but this is what they face. You know, do you think is it okay for a stronger nation to dominate a weaker nation for its resources and as a market for their products? You know, an easy answer would be to say no. And I think maybe easily yes, but there's a strong argument on both sides. In this case, Africa is being, you know, rampage. You're going to have, you know, war that's going to come as a result from these tribal peoples going at it. And then you got these Europeans coming in and, you know, making land boundaries where land boundaries were never there before. And so that's the question that these people face. Militarism, the buildup of the military. Different European countries are going to build up their militaries in different aspects. And as one European country sees another building up their military, like I said, the British building up their navy, the Germans do it as well. You know, during World War I, especially, the Germans are going to be the first ones to have a weapon that we had never seen before. I mean, all the countries in the world are terribly terrified of the German U-boat, a boat that can be under the water and can, you know, get into your territory without anybody knowing it in the dead of the night. That terrifies everyone. And Germany's gonna, just because of their superior technology in that regard, it's gonna have a lot of the other countries on their toes. Now, that of all the causes of the war, the one that is a sincere, and I would argue the most biggest cause in regards to the breakout of World War I is what's called the system of alliances. Okay, the alliance system, agreements between nations to aid one another if they were attacked. And the thing is, with this, not everyone knows necessarily who's aligned with the others. Okay, the alliance system. It's just, you know, if somebody attacks, you know, Austria-Hungary, Germany promised to jump in. If somebody attacks Serbia, Russia has to jump in. And as a result, there's this real big event that happens that brings everybody in. So look, one alliance had Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. Okay, the other alliance was the British, France, and Russia. And as you see in this cartoon, you know, Serbia's attack, Austria jumps in. As Austria's attack, Russia jumps in. As Germany's attack, France jumps in. And it's just, that's what essentially brings World War I to its head. Kind of like a situation we have right now with Russia and Ukraine. If in fact if Ukraine was a NATO allied country, we today, right now, we'd be in war with Russia as we speak. So this is, I don't have a hard time explaining to my kids, but they kind of get lost in this, so just bear with it. But like I said, the system of alliances in 1914, the country of Austria-Hungary, right here, what you see in green, used imperialism to control several smaller nations located in the Balkans. What you see down here in red, you got Romania, Serbia, Bulgaria, and Greece. Now, all of these countries do not appreciate being controlled by Austria-Hungary, but Serbia is the only one that does in fact jump on it and does do something about it. Okay, all this right here, and all these countries within this region in the red, all of them have secret alliances with bigger and badder countries. Okay, so what happens is the match that essentially started World War I. Europe in general, it's a powder cake. It's set to explode. It's primed for war, and that's exactly what happened. So Serbia sends out an assassin to kill the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. And from my understanding, the Archduke is there. There's an attempted assassination on him. They throw a grenade under his car. Instead of going home like anybody else would have, they stay there. They make a wrong turn somewhere, and the Serbian assassin shoots him dead. And that's how World War I gets started. The assassination of its leader caused Austria-Hungary to declare war on little Serbia. Okay, but as that happened, Serbia had an alliance with Russia, so Russia has to jump in. And so when Austria-Hungary attacked Serbia, the Russians came to the defense and declared war on Austria-Hungary, which in turn brought Germany into the war because they had an alliance to help Austria-Hungary. It's just a big old system of alliances. When somebody jumps in, the other gang has to jump in, and just a big old powder keg. It's a huge war. Okay, very similar to say like Poland. Poland is in present day what's called NATO. If Russia would in fact attack Poland, although Poland is a small country, we, the United States, would be obligated to jump in. We would have to jump in. It's the same thing that happens here. Okay. Now, the next part we're going to talk about is America's involvement. We do not join the war initially. It starts in 1914. We joined in 1917. And as we joined in 1917, the war's over not too long after that. So when the war first starts, it starts in Europe. We, the United States, were allegedly neutral. We claim that, but that's not necessarily the case. We say we're neutral, but we're still selling the British weapons. We're giving them ammunition. So we claim that we're neutral, but we're not exactly neutral. But we're not officially part of the war effort yet. And there's a number of reasons why we want the British to win. You know, we have shared common language, common ancestry. Our founding fathers, many of them were British. So there's a number of reasons why we want them to win, but we don't join the war till about 1917. Okay, so allegedly we're neutral. We're staying out of it. Okay. Like I said, a number of reasons. We have close ties with both Britain and France. Our economies are intertwined. Another thing that it pushes us toward warfare is Germany is going to announce what's called unrestricted submarine warfare. Anything they see in her waters, they're going to bomb it. No questions asked. And Germany gets a lot of criticism for it, but at the same time, there's a blockade around Germany, and Germany is literally starving to death, which is why I think they do that. But they are going to kill some innocent people, some Americans especially, and which is why it's one of the reasons why we get involved. And we're going to take a look into propaganda. And thinking of Lusitania, and I think the Zimmerman note, essentially a note from Germany to Mexico: hey, if you attack the United States and if we win the war, we'll give you back all of the Southwest. Now, propaganda is going to be very big in World War I. We'll see this a lot, okay? They're going to encourage Americans and just Europeans in general to join the war effort. They're going to ask you to these posters. You'll see them everywhere around town, in the post office. You'll see them at church. You'll see them in the cafeteria, in the break room. And for the most part, they serve 3 different causes. Okay, patriotism, conservation. Okay, monetary means you contribute to the war with in regards to money if you couldn't contribute physically. Okay, and those also means to promote support of the war effort. So like this one, you know, they have this damsel in distress. You know, she's bare-breasted. You have the German brute coming to attack her. You know, if we don't fight them over there and kill them over there, you know, we're gonna risk them coming over here. You know, killing our kids and taking our women or whatnot. Okay, and this was very prominent in World War I. We'll see this again in World War II. But these were put out by the United States government. I'm not sure if you can see it there, but it says if this war is not fought to a finish in Europe, it will be on the soil of the United States, and on the water here it says America. And there's the German brute. We know he's German because he's got that funky little German hat that they wear in war and stuff like that. So it's Europe today, and it's Europe yesterday, United States tomorrow. We got to do something and stuff like this. Okay, so maybe you can contribute to the war effort physically. You could buy what's called Liberty bonds. Liberty bonds were essentially you're lending the government money, and I think most of the money for the war we're gonna get them through Liberty bonds. So maybe you buy it. I'm gonna make up a number. You buy it for $100. You promise not to cash it in for say 10 years. At the end of the 10 years, your $100 is now like $600. Okay, and these still exist today. I saw something a while back. Somebody found one at a Goodwill. It was a lot of money. But so you can contribute to the war effort in this particular way as well. Another thing was this conservation. You would save up your bacon grease. You would put it on the side of the stove. You would wait, like a coffee can. Maybe you waited to it filled up. You would take it to your local army recruiting station. They would use the glycerin and the bacon to make bullets. You would sacrifice your silver. You would, I think it was like heatless Wednesdays. You promised not to use gas on Wednesdays. You were encouraged to plant your own food. Anytime you went to the grocery store, you're taking food away from the mouths of our troops. In order to win the war, you have to plant your own food and conserve as much as you can. And it was very patriotic. You might have, it'll come on the newspapers, maybe San Antonio versus Houston, Texas. Who's buying the most in the war bonds? Who's planting the most victory gardens, and stuff and so forth. It was a very patriotic time. A lot of people got into it. Different schools, different districts would do it. There's always a running tab. Now, the Zimmerman note is essentially this. It's a note from the Germany telling Mexico that, hey, if you attack the United States, okay, when the war is over, we will give you, the Southwest of the United States back. You'll get back Texas, California, Arizona, New Mexico, okay? Mexico does not bite on that bait. We in the United States, we hear about this, we're incensed, it comes out in the papers, betrayal and whatnot. And we're screaming more and more for war. So you have the Zimmerman note, you have all this propaganda. We're pushing closer and closer to the war, but we're not exactly there yet, okay? You can't see it that well, but this is a German Kaiser maybe, got a knife and telling Mexico, hey, we'll give you back Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California, okay? But we got to win the war, but we need to attack the United States. Now, what the United States argues, right, according to our textbooks, the reason why we, the United States, joined the war officially is because Germany announces what's called unrestricted submarine warfare. Anything they see in her waters, you can see it here, Germany is going to sink it, okay? Remember, keep this in mind, though. Germany is fighting for her life. She's at war, and they just put a blockade on her. Germany is literally starving to death, okay? That being said, Germany's going to cross the line. They're going to kill some innocent peoples. And that's what pushes even closer, okay? So Germany promises with the Sussex feds not to do that anymore. They can give you a fair warning, okay? Prior to sinking you to make it, and Germany was even sending up like passenger boats to let civilians off before they were attacking after this, which, Germany has given up a strategic advantage at this point. Now, the sinking of the Lusitania, we have Americans on here, okay? About 128 Americans, they're killed. After they're killed, you see it in the papers, there's all these dramatic photos, prints of like I saw one as like a little girl. I'm not even sure if she was actually killed in it, but like in a white dress hanging on to like a piece of wood sinking at the sea. the Germans attacked this boat. Okay, it's going from the United States, I believe, the New York Harbor, and it's going over to the British. Germany believes that there's ammunition on that boat, and there, in fact, was. And remember, at this time, we, the United States, were claiming that we're neutral, and we are, in fact, shipping weapons over there. That being said, innocent Americans are, in fact, killed. Okay, and it's going to be used as a calling card to join the war. Okay, remember the Lusitania, it's your duty. Okay, to take up the sword of justice, to avenge this devil's work, talking about the Germans. Okay. Now, in regards to this, look, this is something very typical you might see on y'all's exam. They might give you a political cartoon like this. I know we haven't covered it, but just using the context clues, you guys should be able to get this. Okay. This cartoon depicts President Wilson's calling on Congress to, this is President Wilson, Congress called to convene April 2nd. It says here, American ships sunk without warning. Okay. Okay. They might give you some kind of stimuli in regards to this, but like we just covered, American ships sunk without warning, Americans' lives lost. As a result of this, the answer would be B. All right. We, the United States, President Wilson issues a declaration of war against Germany. This was a newspaper heading. Lusitania sunk by submarine, probably 1,260 dead, twice torpedoed off Irish coast, sinks in 15 minutes. This was all over the place. You know the powers that be, you know the media. I think they wanted war. They hyped this up a lot. Just very similar to the stuff we see on the news now. But you know, in regards to World War I, okay, like I said before, what distinguishes World War I more than any other war is the weapons that are introduced during this particular time. We have the machine guns. We have poison gas. Not everybody liked it. From my understanding, the Germans especially like gas. Submarines, it's going to be a German invention, German engineering, airplanes, tanks, okay? Now in that regard, look, these weapons are going to make it easier to defend a position rather than attack, okay? It's going to be the machine gun that's going to cause a stalemate in World War I. You have, I'll break down what that means. So here is the Western Front here in yellow, okay? Here's where they dig trenches. Okay, and inside the trench, you're on one opposing side, you have the different armies, and within the middle, you have what's called no man's land. You're essentially a dead man if you get in there. If you see what's that movie? The War Horse is a good movie. All Quiet on the Western Front, I believe, is a really good movie in that regard. But anybody that enters the middle, you're essentially dead. The machine gun does things to the body that weapons had never ever done before. To gain just half a mile, you're gonna have to sacrifice 200 men. You know, and the generals, the higher ups that know this. It's an incredibly deadly war, a horrible war. Like the machine guns, look, for those of you guys that like guns, but most soldiers use the bolt action rifle that, although powerful, was limited in the number of bullets it could fire in a short amount of time. The machine gun changed that, okay? Poison gas, okay? Adolf Hitler, you guys might not know this, but Adolf Hitler fights in World War I. Okay, he's almost blinded by gas in World War I. He's, I think his job was kind of like a pretty dangerous job. He was like a messenger. Within the trenches. He's almost blinded by it. And so like later on, we're not there yet, but when we get to World War II, he uses that as an inspiration for people to vote him in or whatnot, because he is elected into office. He doesn't take over violently. And this is not so after he gets in, he does all that crazy stuff. But airplanes, tanks are a brand new invention. They're not the tanks that we have today. They're very, very slow. But it will be the tank that breaks up the trenches. Okay, a tank goes in no man's land. You got soldiers behind it, you know, and they can do what they got to do in order to kill the enemy and stuff like that. But the tanks are very slow. They're not the tanks that we have today. Now, trench warfare, these trenches are not made very well. Okay, they don't have any plumbing. If it rains very bad. You know, you got these young men fighting for hours at a time. You know, they're up to their hips, to their knees in water. You know, a lot of them get what's called trench foot. These trenches are invaded with rats, rodents. It's not a good place to be. It's a horrible war, horrible war. And then the thing with the trench warfare is you might have hours of fighting, but then you'll stop. And these guys are incredibly bored. They might go days or a week without fighting, and then they'll have a tremendous amount of fighting. It's like, you know, constant warfare for a couple of hours and it stops, and then they're overwhelmed with like boredom, sadness, depression. These guys had it bad. This typical trench like this. And when it rained bad. They had no kind of like drainage system. So soldiers would spend years in the trenches because neither side could advance, causing a stalemate and drown out the war. The death toll, like I said, it's known as the War of Lost Generation. So look, this is something you guys want to take a look at it. Look, and on y'all's test, they might give you something like this. Okay, this is trench warfare. This is what they're talking about if they mention it. And guys just digging with crude shovels. They might go 6 feet deep, and then on one side you have one trench, and on the other side you have another trench. In the middle, what's called no man's land. Okay, so this one's just talking about the tactic that's being used. This photograph shows a military tactic that the answer to this one should be B. Okay, made frontal assaults difficult, resulting in a stalemate. Very similar to chess. You know, if you played chess before, there comes a time where nobody wins. Okay, it's a stalemate. The game ends, and we found ourselves in that in World War I for a very long time. Might give you something like this too. Might give you a short quote and just wants you to answer on that. Okay. You just read everything. Read whatever stimuli they give you, the context. Read who wrote it. You know, when it was wrote it. For the most part, I think a lot of the times that stuff gives you the answer. Okay, so look, so this next part we're going to talk about what are we doing here at home to prepare for the war effort. Okay, like I said earlier, not everybody was able to contribute physically, or maybe you had a loved one that was fighting abroad and you wanted to support them, so you planted your own victory garden. You bought a Liberty Bond. You didn't use your heater on certain days. Everybody, it was a very patriotic time. It's very incredible in regards to the attitude of America at this particular time. Everybody supported the war effort, and everybody supported the young men over there fighting. So look, initially, we do not have enough troops for the war. We do not. And so this hasn't been used in a very long time. I believe the last time we had a draft was in the Vietnam War. We don't have a draft anymore. Potentially, we could with the selective service. But the last time a draft was used was, in fact, during Vietnam. So and we're going to see a lot of this. I really love these propaganda posters. I show them to my kids a lot. It really draws their attention, you know, and you'll notice that it's always like a damsel in distress, or they'll show like a mother, you know, with her hands behind the, you know, shoulder of her son, you know, taking her off to war and whatnot. But this one's very clever. I want you for the Navy, all right? No funny ideas. But to fight the war, President Wilson was given increased powers by Congress. Okay, we did not have enough troops for the war. About 3 million young men will be drafted into the war effort. That being said, most of these young men had never been to war before. They had never seen battle. They did not know what was ahead of them. And so I think it's going to be General John J. Pershing. He's the one that's going to be tasked with training these young men. And he's not going to send them to war unprepared. They're going to go through a very intense training. And I think he's credited with saving a lot of Americans by making sure he trains them well prior to deployment. Now, a big issue during this time is this. Look, should we as Americans be able to criticize our government in the time of war? Okay. And so the espionage, this is very big on the STAR test. I would imagine on your test as well. But during the war, civil liberties were violated to meet wartime needs. Free speech was one. The Espionage and Sedition Act of 1917 made it a crime to criticize or hinder the war effort. Okay, and you'll see propaganda posters like this. Loose lips might sink ships. All right. Don't kill her daddy with careless talk. Okay, they put a little girl looks sad. She looks like she's about to cry, but they do that for a reason. It's all propaganda. Quiet. Criticism of society is not free speech. Okay. Now look, whether we're in war effort or not, the Constitution reigns supreme. Okay. This, in fact, is a violation of the First Amendment, whether or not we're in war or not. This violated American civil rights, like the First Amendment and freedom of speech. And that's gonna be the issue. It was a constitutional issue. Okay. It should never be limited, and there is limitations to it. You can't scream fire in an open theater. You can threaten someone even online. You can but child pornography or whatnot. But we're free to criticize religion, government, our current president, past president. We have those rights under the First Amendment. Criticize war, that's not going to be during this particular time. So the major court case that comes about during this time is something called Schenck versus the United States. Okay, he's fighting for a peaceful resistance. He is telling people to burn their draft cards. They are having like protests or whatnot, parades, but they're not advocating for anything violent. Okay. So if you see that, it's in that regard. Schenck versus the United States. The court initially is going to rule that during a time of war, your freedom of speech is in fact limited. So something like this, probably something you could see too. This 1917 illustration was published as a commentary on a proposed piece of legislation. You see the Statue of Liberty here, okay? So there's liberty on here. Over here it says enlightenment. It's asking what is missing here, okay? Something that our government has taken away the enlightenment, right? The right to criticize, freedom of speech. The answer to this one would be J, the Espionage Act, okay? The Espionage Act took away our freedom. In regards to something you guys might especially see, you won't see Luis Estevez, but you might see Marcelino Serna. He does I believe in World War I. He's going to receive the Medal of Honor. He's going to kill like 26 Germans, captures 24, even though he's shot. Something you could potentially see of him. You also see, I think I have Alvin York on here. I do not believe you'll see anything in regards to James Reese, but you might in fact see something in regards to the Harlem Hellfighters. You will see something about them. Very, very interesting. If you guys get a chance to delve into that, incredible story. Very brave guys. I think these guys are so brave and distinguish themselves so good in battle that even the French are going to give them their own equivalent of their Medal of Honor. But very, very brave guys. Very brave guys. They fought in their own combat units. For initially, they don't let them fight in combat. They don't think they can handle it. And when they are given an opportunity to do so, they distinguish themselves very bravely. Now, look, women play an incredible war during World War I. Okay, prior to this, men are the ones working in these factories. Okay, when all the men are sent abroad to fight, women take up those jobs. Without women filling these roles, we lose the war. They're the ones making the ammunition. They're the ones making, the bullets. They're the ones, fitting the tanks. I mean, you name it, women are doing it. And it was a very dangerous job. From my understanding, just like in regards to certain ammunition that the women are putting together, something as simple as their hair falling out of their hairnet, that rubbing their body, causing static electricity, could cause an explosion in the warehouse. And women, everybody dies. It's an incredibly dangerous job. If women do not do this, we lose the war. Okay, and women took up that call and they served it valiantly. And as a result of women starting to do jobs they hadn't done before and getting a foot into the workplace, women are now going to start to advocate for the rights even more, namely in regards to suffrage. If you guys see that word suffrage means voting. That's what they're getting at. But the 19th Amendment, women gain suffrage. Women gain the right to vote. Suffrage and voting is the same exact word. And in the exam, they might use those words interchangeably, but they'll most likely use suffrage, okay? Like I said earlier, look, maybe you couldn't serve in the war physically, or maybe you had a loved one, maybe your son, your brother, your uncle is fighting in the war, you can still contribute. Okay. The cost of the war is about $30 billion. Okay. We're gonna raise an incredible amount of money through what's called Liberty bonds. You buy the bond, you promise not to cash it in. You're essentially lending the government money. You promise not to cash it in for a certain amount of 6 years, and when you do, your money has gained interest, and you get back more than what you initially put in. It's an investment, and you can still buy bonds today. And there's still some people that got these Liberty bonds. They held them on as mementos, and this whole time since World War I, they've increased in value, increased in value, increased in value. So look, there's kind of some kind of stimuli you might see, okay? And it essentially gives you the answer. Look, if you can enlist, it's telling you invest, buy Liberty bonds. Okay, this is in regards to World War I. We'll see these again in World War II, but they serve, in both cases, serve the same purpose. Okay, this World War I era poster was intended to persuade civilians to help finance the war effort. Okay, like I said, you guys aren't getting into any kind of in-depth knowledge, just topical survey knowledge, nothing crazy. Now look, just like any other conflict, when the war comes to an end, there is something that has to end it. We're almost done. This is the last section. But there has to be some type of agreement. Is anybody going to pay reparations? What boundaries are going to be lost? What boundaries are going to be gained? Who's going to make concessions, such and so forth. Okay. In this case, the Treaty of Versailles, this takes place in Versailles, France, and for the most part, we, the United States, are going to head that effort. And there's going to be some people that aren't invited to the party. Okay, like Russia. Russia, although they play a big part in the war, Russia's not invited to the party. Russia has a communist revolution. The Bolsheviks take over, and as World War I ends, Russia's going through her own thing at that particular time. Okay, but for the most part, look, what were the main ideas of the Treaty of Versailles? President Woodrow Wilson will come up with something called the 14 points. Okay, one of the main stipulations there is he wants some of these independent nations, ethnic minorities in some of these countries to have their own independence. Okay, I think we'll see Poland for the first time. I think, and there's some other things in that regard. And then we'll especially something called the League of Nations, which is essentially modern day NATO, right? A conglomeration of all these different countries that vow to prevent other wars from happening. The League of Nations fails. Nobody wants any part of it. They're afraid it's going to bring us into another war. Okay, we're going to promote what's called isolationism. Let's stay on our own. George Washington had always told us to stay away from European affairs. Those guys are always getting into something. We need to mind our own business. Okay, I sincerely wish we would heed to George Washington's advice and do that today. We get in too much stuff. Okay, so look, we got to get some terms. Armistice. It's a peace agreement. Okay, it's not an end to the war for the most part. It's let's just agree to not stop fighting. Like right now, North Korea and South Korea, they're at an armistice. From my understanding, they're technically still at war. They just agree to not fight each other anymore. Reparations for damages caused, in this case by war, and ratify to okay or give support to something. Now, General John J. Pershing, he's something. If you see anybody in regard to World War I, in regards to generals, you'll see General John J. Pershing. He's in charge of what's called the American Expeditionary Force. They might call them the AEF. Their nickname was called the Doughboys. You might refer to them as that. But he had a lot of experience, I believe, in the American-Mexican War. He's very versed in war. I think that's why the troops loved him. And like I said earlier, he's credited with making sure our boys were trained in battle prior to going. Okay, we won't get into it too much, but just understand that the Battle of the Argonne Forest is a very big part of General John J. Pershing. He's the one that leads that. Okay. Black Jack Pershing earned his nickname as commander of an all-black regiment during the Indian Wars of the late 1800s. He looks like a tough guy. Alvin York, incredible story. This guy gets the Medal of Honor. He's from Tennessee. From my understanding, growing up as a kid, the way he learned to shoot was well, first of all, they had to go shoot. If they didn't get any food for the day, they didn't eat. So it was an incredible part of him growing up, which has made him such an excellent shooter in World War One. He did a lot of turkey shooting. But if you see anything in regards to Medal of Honor recipients, Alvin York is one that comes up a lot. Okay. In the Battle of the Argonne Forest, Sergeant York single-handedly was responsible for killing 25 Germans and capturing 102 prisoners of war all by himself. Yeah, absolutely. And this wasn't just the case for Alvin York. This was the case for just Americans in general. Alvin York, he represented the typical draftee in World War One. He was underprivileged and uneducated. That being said, the skills he took to the war, the stuff he grew up with, that's what helped him out in the war. Now, Wilson's 14 points. Okay, President Wilson brought in the war aims from a defense of what's called freedom of the seas. Right? Remember, Germany had announced unrestricted submarine warfare. A big part of President Wilson's 14 points was that different countries should have freedom of the seas. It's a neutral ground. Okay, you can't just be bombing ships just because someone invades your waters is there. We need freedom of the seas to promote commerce and globalism. And it's essentially 14 points. It's supposed to be a means for world peace to prevent another world war. We know that it doesn't work because we had World War II. So Wilson's 14 points. Major European nationalities would be given the right of self-determination about their own country and government. Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire would be divided into smaller nations. Okay. Wilson called for reduction in arms, removal of trade barriers, and an end to secret diplomacy. Most important of all to Wilson was his plan, what was called the League of Nations, an organization to mediate international disputes to avoid war. Essentially, a global police force of which the United States would lead. Okay. That's the case right now, even in regards to NATO or United Nations. We, the United States, we sacrifice the most people and we pay the most into those than any other country. No one contributes more than us, which doesn't sound like a fair deal. Now, the League of Nations, it's going to be promoted. Wilson's going to go all across the country to promote it. Nobody's going to like it. Okay. A lot of Europeans don't like it. Americans especially don't like it. They argue, and rightly so, that this is going to do is bring us into another war. Okay, which is a major cause of World War I. Remember the secret alliances. Okay. Now look, Germany signs the Treaty of Versailles. She doesn't have a choice. Germany essentially has a gun to her head. It's like you either sign this or the war's not over, and we're still, going to keep on kicking your butt. So Germany's first to sign it, and Germany is going to be treated incredibly harshly. Some would argue that the Treaty of Versailles may have led to World War II because Germany's going to have to pay back billions of dollars in reparations. Germany has to accept total blame for the war. Okay, when it was actually Austria-Hungary, right? And so, and from my understanding, Germany today is still paying back reparations from World War I. They still have to concede all that debt, right? So, and like I said, you have the Treaty of Versailles. You have a country, Germany. They're not going to have any food after World War I. The Great Depression is going to hit there too. Their money is worthless. And then you got this leader that's very charismatic, and Adolf Hitler says he can make things better, right? And despite all the bad things that he's saying in regards to his plans for, his Holocaust and all that stuff, people are disregarding that because, it's going to make their country better. So, there's a lot of these reasons in regards to why World War II gets started, okay? So like I said, look, terms were considered harsh by the Germans and would lead to World War II, okay? Ultimately, the League of Nations will be rejected. We'll get this later in regards to NATO, and today, we got the UN, okay? But the person primarily responsible for the rejection of the League of Nations is going to be Senator Henry Cabot Lodge. He strongly opposed the creation of the League, saying the USA would lose its freedom of action, which is absolutely true, okay? We wouldn't have any say-so in regard to whether or not we want to be involved in a war or not. With the League of Nations, if one of our partners gets involved in the war, we have to join the war, and vice versa. And so, look, for the most part, we're gonna heed to George Washington's advice, at least for a good little while. We're gonna return back to what's called isolationism. It's exactly it is exactly as it reads. Just essentially, the United States becoming isolated and just America first. Forget about everybody else. It's just concentrated on us, and maybe that's why we have a lot of prosperity after that. Okay, and then we get the Great Depression and World War II. But anyways, look, by 1919, the American people had become disillusioned by world affairs. Victory in World War I had come at a high price in both lives and dollars. Americans began to think George Washington was right with his advice of staying out of European entanglement. America began to look at their well-being at home. Okay, America should stay out of Europe's business. They are always getting involved in stuff. Okay, and that's still true now. I'm gonna move this here, but this is something very common. You guys should, just with what we were, you guys should be able to answer that. The 14 points reflected President Wilson's belief that in the invention and the affairs of other nations was never justifiable. Travel among nations should be regulated by an international organization. That should be pretty typical, what you guys can see. "14 points. Cooperation among international leaders was essential to maintaining world peace." And why did the United States eventually enter World War I? A European nation had taken aggressive actions against the United States. That's in reference to the Lusitania. And so, look, we're not getting into it yet, but a lot of this will actually lead to the Great Depression, which leads to World War II. What we're going to do is, in regards to isolationism, we're going to try to protect American business by raising tariffs on countries around the world. So, in order to sell, for you to sell any good that's to come into the United States, we're going to charge you an extra tax. That's supposed to promote American business, but other countries aren't going to appreciate our tariffs. They're going to do the same back to us, and that's going to be a reason that gets us into the Great Depression. A number of different reasons. So the Great Depression starts here, it's going to spread globally, and that'll eventually lead us to World War II. What gets us out of the Great Depression isn't FDR's New Deal. That's going to be World War II. Okay. You guys have any questions? I apologize. I know I talk very fast. I've been working on that for years. I gave up on that already, but
this is great information, Mr. Torres. Y'all, if you do have questions, feel free, post them in the chat, ask him. All these are questions, and he's even giving you those examples to look at. Okay, Amanda, yeah. Everybody's saying no, it's all good. They're learning so much from you, Mr. Torres. That's what they're posting in the chat.
Well, I'm very flattered. Thank you guys. I appreciate that very much. I'll send Dr. Bain this PowerPoint, and then there's that All Quiet on the Western Front. There's that War Horse. With this coupled with those movies, I think you guys would be fine. Yes. World War II. There's Saving Private Ryan, because I know you guys are pressed for time. You might get tired of reading and studying, but Saving Private Ryan is really good. In regards to the Great Depression, if you guys have never seen The Cinderella Man, that goes through it dramatically, and it's an excellent movie. It's a true story too. But if I can help with anything else, let Dr. Bain know, and then send you guys some more resources to study and whatnot. But I think you guys got it. You guys just take your time. As long as you guys are studying, you guys will be fine.
Be great. I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording.